Today, we are going to chat about finances with Avi Pinsky, a profit and cash flow optimizer to entrepreneurs. Avi helps small business owners understand their financials so that they can figure out how to grow and become even more profitable. Welcome, Avi, to the show. So, I'm going to dive right in and ask, as a small business owner, when do I know I need someone like you to swoop in and help out? Tell us more about what you do.
That's a great question. And unfortunately, people don't know when they need some help.
Right.
My approach is to help a business through their finances, but really the work that I do is not centered on the finances. I use the company's finances as a guide for how the business can grow more profitably. Right. So essentially, I'm just like any other business coach. If you're stuck in your business and you're not sure what changes to make in order to make more money, or you're just overwhelmed with running your business, right? You're wearing all the hats and you feel like everything is falling on your head, and you don't have any time. Everything is just always crashing down on top of you. So that's a time to call me, right? Don't think, well, that's the time to call any other business coach, but this is a finance guy. I only call him in certain situations. No, I have a finance background, but I use that knowledge, that data that we get from our finances to help you run the business better as a CEO, as a business owner. So you're leading your company instead of kind of just managing it on a day-to-day basis.
Very cool. So can you give me an example? Like, where would someone be feeling stuck and overwhelmed where you would come in and help them?
The general idea is that you're overwhelmed because you don't really know what you don't know as a business owner, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So when you get into business, you typically people are getting into a certain business because they're good at that task.
Right.
Right. So I'll give you an example, right? If somebody's I work a lot with home services, contractors, plumbers, electricians, those types of those people that work with their hands, those blue collar people that I just love so much. So and I identify with just so much because I myself I enjoy tinkering with things and whatnot. So you're working for somebody else as a contractor, as a carpenter on a job site, and you're working there for 10, 15 years. And you're like, okay, it's time to go out on my own. I can do this myself. What do I need my boss for? So you start working, and you're very good at building things. So you start building projects that you can do by yourself, right? You build outdoor patio furniture, or you build here in Israel, a lot of people build their own pergolas or whatever. So maybe you do a pergola here or there. Once you start getting a reputation, people start asking you to build more things. Maybe I want to add a room onto my house. Maybe I want to build a deck, and now you need to build out a team to help you. You can't build this by yourself anymore.
Right.
So as your business starts to grow, you have to now take on a secretary, you have to get a bookkeeper, an accountant, a lawyer, and you need a project manager, you need all the other workers to work underneath you. Now you're no longer a contractor, you're no longer a carpenter, you are now a business owner. And you didn't go to business owner school, right? So
Right.
you don't know how to run a business. So that's when kind of everything starts falling on top of your head. You're like, okay, I don't know how to manage all of this. Right. So that's just
Yeah.
a classic example of somebody who gets into a business because they're very good at what they do, but then it eventually, if they are truly good at what they do and it starts growing and they start being more successful, so they start ending up with more on top of their head than they bit off a lot more than they can really chew. So that's kind of
Sure.
where I can come in and help them and figure out what tasks really they should be focusing on, and how to delegate those tasks and to who.
Wow. Okay. That's a really common problem. I see this happen all the time. And businesses sometimes grow beyond what we can catch up with, and it can be so overwhelming. What about someone in the product-based business? How could you help someone like that?
So it's still the same thing, if you start out as an Amazon seller and you start selling one or two little things, so it's easy. But as your business evolves, so
Yeah.
you just don't really know where all the pieces are holding at all the different times. So I help organize your numbers in a way where you can look at things from a 35,000 foot view and really see from the top down what's working, what's not working, and where do you have to kind of make those tweaks in the way that you're operating so that the business can thrive, instead of burying you, and you can end up with more profits on obviously, and at the same time more freedom, because nobody's starting their own business because they want to work in it 80 hours a week, right? They're stuck, that they were working 80 hours a week for someone else, now they want to move to 40 hours a week or maybe 20 hours a week. right? So when they start their own business, that's the impetus, is to become free from the burdens of a crazy job that's just taking away too much time from their family. And so when they start that business, yeah, at the beginning it gives them that freedom, but as the business grows and grows and grows, so oftentimes it takes away from the freedom in the long run. And I don't want that to happen, right? I want to set people back in and on track as to why they started their business, gain back that time that they desperately wanted when they decided to make this step as a business
Right. Now, you talk a lot about the number one reason why businesses fail. Before you answer that, I want to ask you, what does failure look like? What does that mean to an entrepreneur? At what point do we know we failed?
owner. I guess that probably looks different for each person.
Right.
I would say the business fails when the business closes its doors, right? That's kind of how I would say failure is. If you're still in the game and the business is still going on, so maybe you've had an off year or an off couple of years, maybe even an off decade, who knows? But if you're able to keep the game going, you haven't failed yet, right? There's still hope for you. So just because it seems like you're on the way towards there doesn't mean that you're at that point where you say, okay, time to close up shop and give up. If you're still in the game, you have to think whether you really could keep going on the game or whether it's time to actually say, yeah, maybe it is time to close up shop. But I would say you haven't actually gotten to the failure until you made that decision.
Got it. So that's really based on the entrepreneur. I like to think of it as it's a journey. Running a business is really a journey. And when I thought about, I know that that's something that's like a huge topic that you talk about, but I started wondering myself, like, at what point do we say it's over, it's done? So now please answer the question, Avi. What's the number one reason why businesses fail? What is that one thing?
So I would say that is they run out of cash. A lot of businesses think that they're going to focus on their profits or on their revenue. And those are all, worthwhile goals to have. But if at the end of the day, the reason why you have a business is so that you can pay your expenses on your family level and pay for your kids' food, pay for your house, your mortgage, your car, whatever it is that you need to support your lifestyle, you need
Yeah.
the cash to do that. And once the business runs out of cash, so then where are you making your money from? And so obviously that's something that business owners have to pay much more attention to is what's the cash on hand at the end of the month? How much do I need to keep on hand to keep the business going for future months? And that's kind of something that people that open up, that start their own businesses, are typically not business owner trained, right? There's no business owner school that they went to.
Yeah.
They started a business because they're good at something. And then all of a sudden they find themselves with a cash problem and they don't understand why. So I'll give you just, I'll throw a little jargon out for just 1 second and then I'll explain it. Right. People need to understand their cash conversion cycle. That's probably the biggest thing that business owners don't know and don't know how to keep track of, and they don't understand how it impacts them. So what is the cash conversion cycle? Right. I want to explain it. It's essentially the amount of time that it takes you from when you outlay cash to build your product or buy your inventory or buy the supplies for your jobs or pay your work, whatever outlays of cash you have, or any expenses that you have, from the day you lay out the cash until you collect from your customers. Right? That period of time is time where cash went out the door and cash didn't come back. So that's when you kind of have troubles, right? So you could say, well, I laid out the cash, but I got revenue, I made a sale. That's very nice that you made a sale. Did the person pay you? Because if the person didn't pay you, you don't have the cash. So when now when you have to do job number two, job 3, 4, or whatever it is, you don't have to pay those bills. And if you can't make those payments because you didn't receive the cash yet from job number one, that's when you get into serious trouble. And that's what ultimately leads to a lot of businesses to fail because they just don't have the cash on hand to pay for job 2, 3, 4, whatever it is down the line.
So what would you recommend as a good way to start? I know, like, when I work with clients, I make sure that they have the money to spend before they invest in things, right? So sometimes people will come to me, they just started a business, but they want to set aside a few $1,000s to do their branding and have it really professional. And I usually say to them, I want to make sure you're making money before you pay me because
Exactly.
don't use money you don't have. You don't want to be in the negatives, and even when I'm coaching clients and they have all these big grand ideas and they're going to invest in this and they're going to invest in that. And I'm like, with what money? Make money first. So, do you have like some quick tips on how people could make sure that they're making money before they spend it?
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said, make money first before you're investing in something else, right? Into marketing. Make sure that your business is actually a profitable business and that you can actually collect on your bills, right? Don't make so many sales, on account, as we would say, right? Don't have so many IOUs that are out there from your customers. Make sure your customers are paying you. I had one client who um he had these accounts receivables that were just piling up and up and up. And it was killing him because he's running out of cash. And he's like, I don't understand. My business is profitable. I'm making money. In theory, you're making money, right? And I do, I do encourage people to look at things from an accounting point of view and see what's my revenue and what's my expenses. You need to see that as well, but you also need to make sure you have the cash on hand. So before you start looking at what new branding things can I put out there, what new marketing things, or maybe I want to spend on SEO to upgrade my website, make sure you actually have the cash to sustain your operations. Because if you don't have the cash to sustain your operations and instead you're spending it on your marketing, your operations are going to fail. And then what were you marketing for?
Literally.
You can be having the most successful marketing in the world and it's going to bring in more and more customers, but if every new customer is just another IOU, so that's going to cause you more problems than it's worth, right? It's better to have less customers that you can actually collect on than to
Right.
have more customers that you're not going to collect on. So you need
Totally.
somebody who's going to help you and who's not only going to track your profits and your revenue, right? You might have an accountant, you might have a bookkeeper, and they're looking at those revenues, income, expenses numbers. They're telling you how profitable you are. That's very good and it's very nice. And every business needs to have those things. But you also need somebody else who's going to tell you, okay, are you making the right decisions with your cash so that you can actually survive to, succeed for another month, year, so the business can continue. Right? If you're only looking at your profits, you're only looking at your revenue, your income. So you're missing a huge part of the picture. And that's one of the things that I like to do with my clients. And I get this question a lot is, why do I need you if I have an accountant or a bookkeeper?
Right.
It's a fair question for somebody who doesn't understand this. Your accountant and your bookkeeper, they're all looking in the past. They're all looking what happened. You need somebody who's going to help you look to the future, how to build the company in a smart way so that the company can build profitably and generate more revenue, more profits, and ultimately more cash. Because that's really the crux of any business. It's to get something out of it. You're not starting a business so the business can continue. You're starting a business to support your lifestyle.
100%. Going back to what you said about, investing in marketing to grow the business
Mm-hmm.
and needing to make money while you do that. Suppose you are very profitable and you have the money to invest. Is there some sort of a ratio between money that's coming in and money that goes out toward marketing and any sort of investment, whether it's business coaching or branding, whatever that looks like to the business owner? Should I be making sure that there's a certain amount coming in and going out? What does that ratio look like?
So there isn't like a one size fits all answer for these types of questions, right? Every industry is going to have a standard. You kind of have to do an analysis, and it's really going to be individual for each business, and it's going
Right.
to be individual for each person's risk tolerance. So let's say you're looking about marketing, right? So you kind of have to think if I spend $100,000 on this new marketing campaign or just $100, let's say you're really, really small. I want to spend $100 on a new marketing campaign. So what amount would I have to get back to make it worth it for me to have spent that $100 and to risk it? If I'm really small and $100 is a huge portion of my budget, so I'm going to need a big return in order to make it worth it for me to take that type of risk. And I'm going to need it, in a certain amount of frame, a time frame. And then there's also what's the chances that I'm actually going to hit that return, right? Is that ROI 10% likely, 50% likely set? And how risk averse am I to losing that $100? So If you're a
Right.
big company, you're like, okay, $100, probably not such a big deal. But if you're if now you're talking $100,000, so maybe that's a little bit more of a risk that maybe I'm not willing to take. So it really depends on person, how risky they wanna be with their business and what their investments. It's really just like any other investment, right? If you're gonna invest in stock, how much are you willing to lose? And how much of a risk are you willing to take to gain the possible upside? And what is that possible upside? Do you think this stock is going to triple, quadruple? And that's really an individual analysis on each individual investment and each individual business owner, what they're willing to do with their money and how much they're willing to risk.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. You talk about five numbers to improve to dramatically increase revenue. Can we get into those five numbers? What are they? What are we looking at?
I encourage business owners to look at their business again from a 35,000 feet level, right? So I always like to group things in as few baskets as possible so that they can really determine which basket is performing well, which basket is performing okay, and which kind of I don't like to say it's performing poorly, but where there's room for improvement, let's say. All right. So
Right.
when it comes to revenue, I really like to boil it down to five numbers, and I call them my revenue drivers. The first thing is going to be how many leads do you have, right? How many potential clients are out there in the world that you can actually interact with? That would be driver number one. Driver number two is what's your conversion rate on those clients, right? Are you how good? That's basically comes down to how good of a salesman are you? Are you can you close 50%? Can you close 90%? Maybe you're just starting out, you can only close 5 or 10%, right? So that's kind of dependent on how experienced you are and how good you are at selling. The next thing would be your retention rate, right, of your previous clients, your previous customers, or your previous jobs. How many of them can you get to come back a second time? Um, when you put those three numbers together, you add them up, you do the multiplication. So you'll get to basically what your total customer base is for that year, month, week, whatever period you're using to analyze. Once you then have your total customers, you're going to look at your purchase frequency rate. That's basically how often is somebody coming into your store to buy something, right? So if you have monthly contracts, you'll have and you're looking at things on a yearly basis, so your purchase frequency rate will be 12. If you're looking at things on a monthly basis and you charge your clients weekly, so it'll be 4. If you just own a store and people come in whenever they come in, okay, so what's your average amount of times that your customers come in that month or that year, whatever it is? So those are your four, those are the first four drivers. And then the fifth is what's your average purchase value? Right? How much are you charging for your service or for the things that you're selling? Right. So once you can figure out what these five numbers should look like, so you'll get a basic estimate for where your revenue is going to hold that year. And if you want to increase your revenue, let's say your revenue last year was below your expectations, let's say. So you kind of have to look at each of these five and say, which one of them can I work on in order to make it better the next year? Can I, charge more? Can I charge people more frequently? Right? Can I get them to purchase more often? Maybe yes, maybe no. Can I take a sales course to get better at my conversion rate? Maybe I can take a sales course and bump up my conversion rate another 10%, get more customers in. One thing that I spoke to somebody yesterday about is thinking about the way that they charge is, maybe they charge on a monthly basis. Maybe they want to make a change and charge half as much and do it bi-weekly. So now instead of having 12 cycles a year at, let's say, $1,000, maybe they can have 26 cycles at 500. So now all of a sudden you just got an extra $1,000 per customer in that year. So you kind of have to see how you can play around with these numbers with your specific business, what you can play around with, which ones are kind of stuck where they are, and see which ones can move the needle the most. And those are the ones that you can affect and that you can and that are going to have the biggest impact on the bottom line. Well, on this case, the top line, right? So those are the
Right.
ones that you want to try to tweak as you try to grow your business. And that's kind of something that I do with my clients is I go through, the beginning of the year, right? These are the 5 things that I look at for revenue. There's another 5 that I look at for profit. There's another 5 that I look at for cash flow. And every year we kind of set targets for where we want each of these 15 drivers to be. And each business is gonna, not every business is gonna have all 15 of them. Not
Right.
all businesses are gonna have inventory. Not all businesses are going, maybe you're a solopreneur, so you don't have a payroll, right? So not all of these 15 drivers are going to impact every single business in the same way, but there's usually going to be, let's say, 10 to 12 drivers in any given business. So we'll set goals for each of these drivers at the beginning of the year. Where do we want them to be by the end of the year? And every month we'll analyze them and say, okay, where is it holding now? And where do we think it's going to get to by the end of the year? Which ones are overperforming, which ones are underperforming, and which ones are can we affect, and which ones will have the biggest impact if we affect them. And those are kind of the ones that we want to set an action plan for and see, what can we do about it this month to get that one kind of more in line with our expectations and our goals.
I like how tangible it is. When you really break it down and take a step back looking in, it really helps you plan for the future. How do
Yeah.
you set those goals with your client? How do I know as a small business owner that, let's say I want to triple my revenue versus double my revenue? Is that realistic? Is that something I can strive for? How does that work with setting goals?
It's a great question. And so anybody who wants, I have a, let's say, simplified version of what I do. I have it on my website. You can go to my website, pinskyconsulting.com. There's a little link at the top. It says Prosperity Playbook. You click that, and I will send you a version of this Excel that you can use yourself
Cool.
to set your goals. And basically what it is, it's got a couple tabs where your revenue tab, your profit tab, your cash flow tab, and you can go in and put in what numbers happened last year. And then based on that, where do I want those numbers to be the current year or the next year? You can do it by month, you can do it by year. I typically look at it more by year when I'm setting goals. And you can put in all the numbers of how many leads do I want to get? What do I want my conversion rate to be? What do I want my retention rate to be? How often do I want people to purchase? And how much do I want to charge them? The spreadsheet will then total for you what's your total revenue for the year. Right? And you can say, well, I wanted to double this year. When I put in those numbers, I only 1.5 it, right? I only did 1.5 what I got last year. So then you can start looking and doing that same analysis. Can I get more leads? Can I do a different marketing strategy to get more leads? Can I take a sales course to up my conversion rate? What can I do to retain my clients better? Is there a different way that I could charge them more frequently? Can I charge them more? Right? Those are the 5 things that you can analyze if you want to get that number from 1.5x up to 2x. But another thing to keep in mind in that is that while those 5 numbers impact your revenue is not the end all and be all, right? It's nice to pull in more money and to say, I've got a 5 million, $10 million company. But if your expenses are 11, 12, 13 million dollars, so you don't have a $10 million company, you've got a company that's going bankrupt slowly or quickly,
Yeah.
right? So it's very nice to say I want to double my revenue, but you really have to look at the profits as well, and ultimately at the cash, right? Will I be pulling anything home at the end of the day? Will I be able to pay my expenses and support my family, support my lifestyle at the end of the day? So there's more that you can do than if these 5 things are stuck in stone and you say, oh, I'm stuck at 1.5x, I don't know what to do about it. So look at your expenses, look at the other cash flow drivers and see maybe those things can be tweaked a little bit. And maybe you can come home with a little bit more at the end of the day, even if you're not pulling in as much as you may have wanted to.
Sure. And is there like one number of the 5 that people tend to overlook?
I would say the one that's probably the least utilized is the purchase frequency rate, in my opinion, just because people are either gonna, they're gonna charge you monthly, they're gonna charge you annually. If they're, that's a good way to look at it is there another way to charge them more, right? If I'm charging $1,000 a month, if I tell them, look, I'm not going to charge you monthly, I'm going to charge you biweekly $600, some customers may be okay with it, some might not notice, I don't know. It's really there's different ways to frame it to the clients, and maybe you'll get some of them more on board that way.
Right.
So of these five, I think that's probably the least obvious one to attack.
I would have guessed that. I was going to ask you if it's the purchase frequency, because I also see a lot of people not seeing the potential in working with people that they've already worked with, right? They're always looking for the next lead instead of honing in and working on who's already in front of them. And that's got to be
For
like
sure.
the
Yeah.
biggest thing that's overlooked in business in general. So I'm glad we touched upon that so that listeners can
For
really
sure.
think about who they are working with and how they can work with them even better and smarter.
That's definitely it's less costly to keep an existing client than it is to
Yeah.
go look for a new one, for sure.
I think, and I don't think people realize that, like they're like ready for more, more, more. You don't have to invest in advertising and marketing if you already have customers that want to pay you. So just focus on those people.
For sure.
How often should we be looking at these numbers?
So I look at them with my clients on a monthly basis. I'll get the information from their bookkeepers and I'll analyze the numbers and I'll see what's on track, what's not on track. And then on a monthly basis, I'll meet with the business owner for an hour, maybe sometimes an hour and a half, and come up with an action plan on how to get things that are kind of not right, how to get them back on track. Or even if it might not necessarily even be the things that are the least on track, but the things that we can change, how to change those in the most effective way and efficient way so that the whole picture looks better. So I suggest doing it on a monthly basis. If you have a company that's really small and not so many moving parts, so you might be able to get away with doing it on a quarterly basis. You have to look at these numbers and set your targets at the beginning of every year. If you're like a really big company and things are really moving really fast, you can even set your targets on a quarterly or semi-annually basis. But you should be looking at these numbers at least, on a monthly basis, at least quarterly, seeing, am I meeting my targets, right? That's really the question. Am I going to get by the end of the year to where I wanted to get at the beginning of the year? And if not, why not? And what can I do about it?
That's great.
That's something that's important to keep in mind when you're analyzing your numbers and how you're doing is the seasonality of your business. Right? I like to
Yeah.
use the example of a ski lodge. Right? If somebody's a ski lodge and they get to the end of February and they're like, wow, we're already at 50% of our goals. We're doing great. No, you're doing horribly because your entire season is done and you're
Right.
only 50% of your goals.
That's such a
Right.
good point.
So
Yeah, it is really important
so
to think
something to
about it
keep in mind is the
seasonally.
seasonality.
Yeah.
So let's say you have 1,000, you want 1,000 leads throughout the year, and by February we only have 100. So we're kind of off. I'm not going to say, okay, for the next 10 months we got to make sure we get 90 new leads every month to make sure we hit our 1,000 goal. Maybe not. Maybe we can get 70 for March, 80 for April, and maybe by the time we get to December, maybe we could get to 150 a month. So sometimes you do want to do that slow build in order to get the whole picture on target, even if by June maybe you're not even 50% of the way. You kind of have to look and see what's coming down the pipeline and what can I do about the second half of the year to make up for the first half of the year.
I'm so glad that we got to discuss this because this was such a good, solid conversation about finances. And unfortunately, I see this so often where small business owners really don't think about their finances. They're not taking it into account.
Yes,
They're kind of just willy-nilly spending, earning, and no one's keeping track
exactly.
of anything. And like you said, like they're like, oh, I have an accountant, I'll figure it out. That was me a few years ago. I was like, yeah, let her
Exactly.
handle it. But it's so important
Exactly.
to know. And the more what you've proved today in this conversation is the more aware you are of your finances and you have a financial strategy, the more likely you will grow your business and become even more profitable and increase your revenue because you'll know exactly what you should be focusing on. So thank you so much,
Exactly.
Avi, for having this conversation today. I really appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing
my
your
pleasure.
wisdom. Can you share where people can find you? And I'm going to link that spreadsheet that you mentioned in the show notes. But where can people find you and do business with you?
So pinskyconsulting.com is my website. It's my last name and consulting, Pinsky, and the word consulting .com. You can see more about me there. You can get the prosperity playbook there. You can book a call with me if you'd like. I do free introductory consultations there. You can also send me an email at pinsky.consulting@gmail.com.
Amazing. That is awesome. I'm going to link to all of that in the show notes. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.